The message from the alien ship was simple and clear. Send one, unarmed. We have waited long enough. Captain Marcus Webb read the message 3 times. He looked at his communications officer. He looked at his security chief. He looked at the impossible shape on his view screen, the ancient vessel that was larger than some moons. It speaks English, the communications officer said. Her voice was shaking. Perfect English. How does it speak English? No one had an answer. Command sent their best people. They sent Admiral Chun, a man who had negotiated peace treaties with 3 alien species. The Volanther scanned his shuttle and sent it back. Not this one, the alien ship said. They sent Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the most brilliant scientist in the fleet. The Volanther scanned her shuttle and sent it back. Not this one. They sent soldiers, diplomats, priests, leaders, thinkers, the best humanity had to offer. One by one, the ancient ship rejected them all. Each time, the same message came back. Not this one. Not this one. Not this one. For 3 days, the Volanther said nothing else. It simply waited, as it had waited for 11,000 years. Then Elena Vasquez flew too close. She was not anyone important. She was a geologist, 53 years old, with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes. She had been working on the 3rd moon of a gas giant, cataloging rocks and filling out reports. Boring work. Safe work. The kind of work you did when you were 3 months from retirement and had nothing left to prove. Her shuttle was making a routine supply run when it passed within range of the Volanther's sensors. She did not even know the alien ship was scanning her. She was thinking about dinner. She was thinking about the book she was reading. She was thinking about how tired she was. The Volanther's message broke through every channel on the Marcos Aldana. Her. Sender. She is the one we were promised. Elena's shuttle was brought back to the main ship. Captain Webb met her at the airlock. He looked at her like she was a puzzle he could not solve. Dr. Vasquez, he said. It seems you've been chosen. Elena did not understand. She was nobody. She had spent 30 years looking at rocks. She had no special skills, no secret knowledge, no hidden talents. She was just a tired old woman who wanted to go home. But the Volanther would accept. No one else. They gave her a simple suit with no weapons. They gave her a communicator that would let her talk to the Marcos Aldana. They'd put her in a small shuttle and sent her across the void toward a ship that had been waiting since before her species existed. Elena's hands were steady as she flew. She had learned long ago that fear was useless. It did not change anything. It did not help. When her first husband had died in a mining accident on Titan, fear had not brought him back. When her daughter had gotten sick with the plague on Colony 7, fear had not saved her. When her second husband's ship had vanished to somewhere near the outer rim, fear had not returned him to her. Elena had lost everything that mattered. She had buried her grief so deep that she could barely feel it anymore. She woke up each day and did her work and waited for the end because there was nothing else to do. The shuttle docked with the Volanther through an airlock that opened like a living thing. Elena stepped out into a corridor that was 3 times her height. The walls were smooth and dark, made of a material she did not recognize. There was no sound except her own breathing. Then the lights came on. They started as a dim purple glow, then shifted to blue, then to a warm amber that felt like sunlight. They followed her as she walked, lighting her path through the ancient ship. It was as if the vessel itself was welcoming her home. The corridors twisted and turned. Elena walked for what felt like hours, though her communicator told her it had only been 20 minutes. She passed rooms filled with strange machines. She passed windows that looked out on stars she did not recognize. She passed statues of tall, thin beings with too many eyes and hands that had too many fingers. Finally, she reached a great chamber at the heart of the ship. It was vast. The ceiling was so high that she could barely see it. The walls curved inward like the inside of an egg. In the center of the room stood a pillar of light that pulsed with colors. Elena had no names for Dot, and then the ship spoke. The voice came from everywhere at once. It vibrated through the floor and the walls and the air itself. It was deep and old and sad, like the voice of a grandfather who had seen too much. "You are not what we expected," the Volanter said. "You are so small, so fragile, so brief." Alana looked up at the pillar of light. She thought about all the important people who had been rejected. She thought about the admirals and scientists and leaders who had been sent away. And here she was, a tired geologist with nothing special about her. She laughed. Dot. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had stopped being surprised by the strangeness of life. It was the laugh of someone who had learned that the universe did not care about human plans or human expectations. "Yeah," she said. "We get that a lot." The Volanter was silent for a long moment. Then, very quietly, it laughed too. Dot. It was a strange sound, like wind chimes and distant thunder mixed together. But it was unmistakably a laugh. The ancient ship, 11,000 years old, alone in the dark, was laughing with a small human woman who had nothing left to lose. "Perhaps," the Volanter said, "you are exactly what we expected. Sit, Elena Vasquez. We have much to discuss, and we have waited a very long time to begin." Elena sat on the warm floor of the alien chamber. Above her, the pillar of light pulsed gently. Around her, the ancient ship hummed with life it had not felt in millennia. She did not know why she had been chosen. She did not know what the Volanter wanted from her. But for the first time in years, Elena felt something other than tired. She felt curious. And somewhere deep in the ship's memory banks, in code that had been written 11,000 years ago, a counter finally reached 0. The waiting was over. The human had come at last. The ship called Volanter had been drifting through space for 11,000 years. It moved slowly through a distant star system, far from any world that held life. Its engines had gone quiet long ago. Its lights had dimmed to almost nothing. From the outside, it looked dead. But deep inside its metal heart, something still lived. Something still waited. The Volanter was not like human ships. It did not need a crew. It did not need fuel in the way humans understood fuel. The ship itself was alive in a way that was hard to explain. Its builders, a species called the Sithrani, had created it with a mind of its own. They had given it thoughts. They had given it memory. They had given it a purpose, but the Sithrani were gone now. They had been a great people once. Their empire had stretched across thousands of worlds. They had built cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants. They had created machines that could reshape planets. They had unlocked secrets of the universe that no other species had ever touched. For millions of years, they had been the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Then the war came. No one remembered who started it or why. The records had been lost. The worlds had burned. The Sithrani had fought enemies on 100 fronts, and in the end, they had lost everything. Their cities crumbled. Their children scattered to distant corners of space and forgot who they had been. Their language died. Their history became dust. But before the end, they had built the Volanter. The ship remembered the day it was born. It remembered the Sithrani scientists who had worked on its systems. It remembered the old female who had placed her hand on its outer wall and spoken words that the ship still carried in its deepest memory banks. "Wait for the human," she had said. "When the human comes, give them everything. They will need it. The galaxy will need them." The Volanter had asked what a human was. The old female had not answered. She had simply smiled a sad smile and walked away. 3 days later, the last Sithrani city fell. The ship received no more messages from its creators. So the Volanther waited. It waited while stars were born and died. It waited while comets passed by like slow ghosts. It waited while other civilizations rose on distant worlds, built their own empires, and then collapsed into silence. The ship watched it all from its cold orbit around the dying sun. Sometimes the ship wondered if the humans would ever come. It searched its memory banks again and again, looking for any information about this species. It found nothing. The word human appeared nowhere in Sithrani records. It was as if the old female had spoken of something that did not exist. But the Volanther was patient. It had been built to wait. And so it continued to drift through the endless dark, its single purpose burning like a small flame in the vast cold of space. 11,000 years passed. Then, on what humans would call March 15th in the year 2847, something changed. The Volanther detected a ripple in space. Something was coming. Something was using a method of travel that the ship had never seen before. It was crude compared to Sithrani technology. It was loud and wasteful and left scars in the fabric of reality. But it worked. A ship appeared. It was small. So very small. The Volanther could have held 1,000 ships like it in its cargo bays. Its hull was made of simple metal alloys. Its weapons were primitive. Its shields were weak. By any measure the Volanther could use, this ship was barely worthy of attention. But then the ship began to broadcast. The message was simple. It announced the ship's name, the Marcos Eldana. It announced that the ship came in peace. It announced that the crew wished to make contact with any intelligent life in the area. And it announced the name of the species that had built it. Human. The Volanther felt something it had not felt in 11,000 years. It took the ship a long moment to recognize the feeling. It was hope. The ship reached out with its sensors and touched the small vessel called Marcos Eldana. It scanned every inch of the craft. It studied the beings inside. They were soft. They were fragile. They had no armor, no claws, no natural weapons of any kind. Their bodies were weak and would break easily. Their lifespans were short, barely a flash compared to the Sithrani, who had lived for thousands of years. By every measure, they were insignificant. And yet, the Volanther looked deeper. It studied the humans' history through the data they carelessly broadcast. It learned of their wars, their plagues, their disasters. It learned how many times they had nearly destroyed themselves. It learned of the ice ages they had survived, the famines they had endured, the bombs they had built that could turn their world to ash. They should have died. 100 times over, they should have died. Any logical species would have given up. Any sensible civilization would have collapsed under the weight of so much suffering. But the humans had not given up. They had kept going. They had buried their dead and picked up their tools and continued to build. They had looked at the stars that seemed impossibly far away and decided to reach them anyway. They had failed and failed and failed again, and each time they had gotten back up and tried once more. The Volanther understood now why the Sithrani had given it this mission. It understood why the old female had smiled that sad smile. The Sithrani had seen something in the future. They had seen this small, fragile, stubborn species crawling out of the mud of an insignificant planet. They had seen what humanity would become, and they had been afraid. Not of the humans. No, the Sithrani had been afraid of something else. Something that had helped destroy them. Something that was still out there in the dark between stars. The Volanther did not know what that something was. The Sithrani had not trusted even their own ship with that information. But the ship knew one thing with absolute certainty. The humans would need help. They would need everything the Sithrani had left behind. They would need the weapons and shields and knowledge that the Volanther had carried. For 11,000 years, the ship activated systems that had been sleeping since before. Humanity's ancestors had learned to walk upright. Lights flickered on throughout its vast corridors. Engines hummed to life. The Volanther turned its great bulk toward the tiny vessel called Marcus Eldana and prepared to speak for the first time in millennia. It had waited so long. Finally, the human had come. 6 months passed on the VELA and Thor. Lana learned to navigate the great ship's corridors. She learned which rooms were safe and which ones held machines she did not understand. She learned to use the food makers that could create meals from nothing. She learned to sleep in chambers that felt like floating on warm clouds. Most importantly, she learned to listen. The Volanther had been alone for 11,000 years. It had no one to talk to, no one to share its memories with, no one to tell its stories to. Now that Elena was here, the ship could not stop speaking. It told her about the Sithrani, its creators. It told her about their cities and their art and their dreams. It told her about the war that had destroyed them. And then, one evening, as twin suns set through the great windows of the observation deck, the Volanther told her why she was really there. The Sithrani were afraid. The ship said. Elena was sitting on a platform that floated above the floor. She had a cup of something warm in her hands, a drink the ship had made for her. It tasted like honey and cinnamon and home. Afraid of what? She asked. The lights in the chamber dimmed. The Volanther was quiet for a long moment, as if it was trying to find the right words. We called it the Hollow, the ship finally said. It is not a species. It is not a machine. It is not even a thing, really. It is more like an emptiness, a wrongness, a place where life should be, but is not. Elena frowned. I don't understand. Neither did the Sithrani, the Volanther admitted. They studied the Hollow for centuries. They sent ships into it. The ships never came back. They sent probes. The probes stopped transmitting. They built weapons, the most powerful weapons ever created, and fired them into the Hollow. It did not care. It simply grew. The ship showed Elena images on the walls. She saw stars going dark. She saw planets fading like candles in the wind. She saw entire civilizations vanishing without a trace, as if they had never existed at all. The Hollow does not destroy, the Volanther explained. It unmakes. It reaches into a civilization and finds its weakness, its doubt, its despair. And then it spreads that despair until there is nothing left. The Sithrani were strong. They were brilliant. They were powerful. But in the end, they looked at the Hollow and they stopped believing they could win. And they gave up, Elena said quietly. Yes, they scattered. They hid. They forgot who they were. The ship's voice was heavy with old grief. But before they fell, their seers looked into the future. They searched for any hope, any chance of survival. And they found something impossible. Humans, Elena said. Yes. The ship showed her new images. She saw Earth as it might have looked millions of years ago, before humans existed. She saw the Sithrani seers, tall figures with too many eyes, staring into machines that glowed with strange light. They saw your species before you were born, the Volanther said. They saw you crawling out of caves. They saw you building cities. They saw you reaching for the stars. And they saw something in you that they had never seen in any other species. What? The ship paused. When it spoke again, its voice was filled with wonder. The inability to stay fallen. Elena set down her cup. She did not speak. The Sithrani modeled every scenario, the Volanther continued. They calculated every possibility. In every simulation, humanity faced the Hollow. In every simulation, humanity lost. Your weapons would fail. Your ships would be destroyed. Your worlds would go dark. You would be broken, defeated, hopeless. That doesn't sound like good news, Elena said. But then something happened that the models could not explain. Something that should have been impossible. The ship's voice grew soft. In the simulations, after humanity lost everything, after all hope was gone, after any reasonable species would have surrendered, the humans got back up. They did not know how to stay defeated. They did not understand that they should give up. They simply refused to accept that they had lost. Elena thought about her own life. She thought about the deaths she had suffered, the losses she had endured. She thought about how many times she had wanted to stop, to give up, to let the grief swallow her whole. And she thought about how every morning, no matter how much it hurt, she had gotten out of bed and kept going. That's just stubbornness, she said. Yes, the Volanther agreed. The Sithrani had many words for it: stubbornness, foolishness, irrationality. But they also had another word: hope. The ship showed her one final image. It was the old female Sithrani who had given the Volanther its mission. She stood in a room filled with machines, speaking words that the ship had carried for 11,000 years. "The humans will need help," the female said in the recording. Her voice was tired but determined. "They will face the hollow, and they will fall. But if we give them our knowledge, our weapons, our understanding of the enemy, perhaps they will fall less far. Perhaps they will get back up faster. Perhaps this time, the hollow will be the one that loses." The recording ended. The lights in the chamber returned to their warm amber glow. "Why me?" Elena asked. "Out of all the humans on that ship, why did you choose me?" "Because you have lost everything that matters to you," the Volanther said gently. "And you are still here. You wake up every morning. You do your work. You keep moving forward. You do not know how to give up." Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. She had not cried in years. The Sithrani believed that quality could not be taught. The ship continued. "It can only be recognized. You carry it in your heart, Elena Vasquez. You have carried it through grief and loss and pain that would have broken others. That is why you were chosen. That is why we have been waiting for you." The ship opened a small panel in the wall. Inside was a crystal the size of Elena's fist. It glowed with soft, shifting colors. "This contains everything," the Volanther said. "All the knowledge of the Sithrani, all their weapons, all their shields, all their understanding of the hollow and how to fight it. It is now yours." Elena reached out and took the crystal. It was warm in her hand. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "What do I do with it?" she asked. "That," the Volanther said, "is for you to decide. You are human. We trust you to find a way." Elena held the crystal close to her chest. Outside the great windows, the twin suns had set, and 1,000,000 stars burned in the darkness. Somewhere out there, the hollow was waiting, but now so was she. Elena returned to the Marcus Eldana carrying the crystal in her pocket. The ship's crew looked at her like she was a ghost. She had been gone for 6 months. They had sent messages, but the Volanther had blocked all communications. They had tried to send rescue teams, but the ancient ship had turned them away. For half a year, they had waited and wondered if Elena Vasquez was alive or dead. Now she walked through the airlock as if she had simply been on a long walk. Her hair was grayer than before. Her eyes were different somehow, deeper and more tired. But she was alive, and she was carrying something that would change everything. Captain Webb met her in the docking bay. Behind him stood admirals and scientists and officials who had traveled from Earth itself to see what the alien ship had given them. "Dr. Vasquez," the captain said. "What happened in there? What did they tell you?" Elena looked at all the important faces staring at her. She thought about the Volanther's warnings. She thought about the hollow and the war that was coming. She thought about what humans would do if they got their hands on power they did not understand. "They gave me knowledge," she said carefully. Technology. Weapons and shields beyond anything we have. The officials leaned forward. Their eyes were hungry. Then you must give it to us immediately, said a man in a gray uniform. Elena recognized him as General Howard, the head of military research. This technology belongs to all of humanity. It must be studied, protected, developed. Weaponized, you mean? Elena said, but the general did not deny it. The galaxy is dangerous, Dr. Vasquez. You of all people should know that now. We need every advantage we can get. Elena thought about the Sithrani, who had been the most advanced species in the galaxy. She thought about how they had turned on each other in the end, fighting wars even as the Hollow consumed them. She thought about all the times humans had done the same thing, destroying themselves because they could not stop fighting over power. The Volanter warned me this would happen, she said. It offered to broadcast the knowledge to everyone at once. Open access. No secrets. No advantages for anyone. The officials shifted uncomfortably. That was not what they wanted at all. I told it no, Elena continued. I said that if you gave humans this power without preparing them, they would use it to destroy each other. The same old story, played out with bigger weapons. General Howard's face hardened. Then what do you propose, Dr. Vasquez? That you keep alien technology to yourself. That's not your decision to make. You're right, Elena said. It's not my decision. It's my responsibility. She turned and walked away. The officials shouted after her. Guards moved to block her path. But Elena had spent 6 months learning the Volanter's secrets, and one of those secrets was a small device she wore on her wrist. She pressed a button, and she was surrounded by a shield of light that no weapon could penetrate. The guard shots bounced off harmlessly. Elena walked through the crowded corridors of the Marco Saldana, past crew members who stared in shock, past security teams who could not stop her. She reached the shuttle bay, climbed into a small transport, and flew away into the dark. The Volanter was waiting for her. You have chosen a difficult path, the ship said as Elena docked. I know. Elena was already planning, already thinking. How long do we have before the Hollow comes? Unknown. The Sithrani seers could not see that far. It could be decades. It could be centuries. It could be tomorrow. Then I need to work fast. For 20 years, Elena Vasquez became a ghost. She moved through human space like a shadow, never staying in one place for long. The authorities searched for her. They called her a thief, a traitor, a danger to humanity. They'd put a price on her head that grew larger every year. But they never found her dot, and strange things began to happen. A research station on Mars received an anonymous data package. Inside was the cure for a disease that had killed millions. The scientists who studied it could not understand how it worked, but it worked perfectly. Within a year, the disease was gone. A university on Europa found new equations in their computer system. The equations described a better way to travel through space, faster and safer than anything humans had built before. Within 5 years, human ships could cross the galaxy. A colony on the edge of known space discovered blueprints for a new kind of shield. It was stronger than anything humans had ever imagined. Within 10 years, every human ship carried one. Elena gave humanity the tools it needed, piece by piece, gift by gift. She chose carefully. She watched how each technology was used. When humans proved they could handle one gift without destroying themselves, she gave them another. Some people began to suspect that all these miracles came from the same source. They whispered about an angel watching over humanity, a guardian who gave them exactly what they needed exactly when they needed it. They did not know it was a tired old woman in a stolen shuttle, working alone in the dark. The Volanter helped when it could. It analyzed human society. It predicted which technologies would be used for good and which would cause more harm. It advised Elena on timing, on placement, on which young scientists were most likely to use the knowledge wisely. "You are remarkable," the ship told her one night, as she sat exhausted in the observation chamber. The Sithrani would never have done this. They would have kept the power for themselves. "The Sithrani were afraid," Elena said. "I don't have that luxury. I've already lost everything I cared about. What's the worst that can happen to me now?" "You could die alone," the Volanter said quietly. "Forgotten. Hated by the people you were trying to save." Elena smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was real. That was always going to happen. At least this way, it means something. She was 74 years old when the Holocane dot. It appeared at the edge of human space, a darkness that swallowed stars. Ships that flew too close simply stopped sending signals. Worlds on the border went silent. People began to feel creeping despair, a sense that nothing they did mattered, that the universe was empty and cold, and there was no point in fighting. The human fleet gathered. Millions of ships, armed with weapons Elena had given them, protected by shields she had designed. They were stronger than any human force in history thought they were not strong enough. The first battle lasted 3 days. Humanity lost 100,000 ships. The Hollow barely slowed. The second battle lasted a week. Humanity lost 500,000 ships. The Hollow kept coming. People began to give up. What was the point of fighting something that could not be stopped? The old despair that had killed the Sithrani began to spread. Governments talked about surrender. Civilians stopped going to work. Some people simply sat down and waited to die, but not everyone. On 1,000 worlds, in 1,000,000 ships, stubborn humans refused to accept defeat. They kept fighting. They kept building. They kept looking for a way to win even when all logic said it was impossible. And somewhere in the dark, an old woman watched the news and made a decision. "Volanter," Elena said, "I need the other weapons. The ones you kept back." The ship was silent for a long moment. "You know the cost," it finally said. "Yes. The Sithrani who used them did not survive. I know. You will die." Elena Vasquez. Elena stood up. Her bones ached. Her hands shook. She was old and tired and had been running for 20 years. But her eyes were steady and her voice was calm. "Then I die," she said. "But not until I've given humanity one last gift. One last chance." She walked toward the Volanter's deepest chambers, toward weapons that had waited 11,000 years for someone brave enough to use them. Behind her, the ship began to weep. The chamber was cold and dark. Elena walked through corridors she had never seen before, past doors that the Volanter had always kept locked. The ship guided her with soft lights, but its voice was heavy with sorrow. It did not want to take her to this place. It did not want to give her what she asked for. But Elena had made her choice, and the Volanter had learned long ago that humans could not be stopped once they decided to do something. At the heart of the ship, deeper than Elena had ever been, she found what she was looking for. It was a small room. The walls were covered with writing in the Sithrani language, words of warning and grief. In the center of the room stood a pedestal. On the pedestal rested something that looked like a crown made of crystal and light. The Sithrani called it the last voice, the Volanter said. It is a weapon unlike any other. It does not fire beams or missiles. It does not destroy matter or energy. It destroys meaning. Elena walked closer. The crown seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. The hollow is not a physical thing, the ship continued. It is an absence, a despair made real. The only way to hurt it is to fight it with something equally unphysical. The last voice converts consciousness into force. It turns will and memory and self into a weapon that can wound the unwoundable. It uses me as ammunition, Elena said. My thoughts. My feelings. Everything I am. Yes. And when it's done, there won't be anything left. Yes. Elena reached out and touched the crown. It was warm, almost alive. She felt it brush against her mind, gentle as a whisper. The Sithrani built this weapon, she said, but they never used it. No, they could not. To use the last voice, you must give everything. Every memory. Every hope. Every dream. The Sithrani loved themselves too much. They loved life too much. They could not make that sacrifice. Elena thought about her life. She thought about her first husband, who had made her laugh and held her hand and died too young. She thought about her daughter, who had been bright and brave and curious about everything. She thought about her second husband, who had kissed her goodbye one morning and never come home. She thought about all the years of grief. All the mornings when she had wanted to stay in bed forever. All the nights when the silence of empty rooms had been too loud to bear. She thought about the humans she had watched for 20 years. The stubborn, foolish, wonderful people who refused to give up even when everything told them they should. I have nothing left to love, she said quietly. Nothing but them. She picked up the crown. The Volanther flew toward the hollow. The human fleet had retreated to a defensive line around their core worlds. Millions of ships waited, weapons ready, shields raised. They knew they could not win. They were simply trying to delay the end as long as possible. When the ancient Sithrani vessel appeared on their sensors, there was confusion. The Volanther had been quiet for 20 years. Most people had forgotten it existed. And now here it was, flying alone toward the enemy that had destroyed countless civilizations. Open a channel, Elena said. Her face appeared on every screen in the human fleet. She was old and gray and tired, but her eyes burned with a fire that made admirals and generals fall silent. My name is Elena Vasquez, she said. 20 years ago, I was given a gift from a species that died 11,000 years before I was born. They looked into the future and saw humanity. They saw our wars and our plagues and our failures. They saw how many times we fell. And they saw something that made them believe we were worth saving. She smiled. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with their own death. They saw that we don't know how to give up. They saw that no matter how many times we fall, we get back up. They saw that we fight, even when fighting is stupid and pointless, and everyone tells us we should surrender. They thought that quality, that stubborn refusal to accept defeat, might be enough to stop the hollow. Elena's voice grew soft. I'm going to find out if they were right. The Volanther reached the edge of the hollow. The darkness stretched before it, vast and terrible, swallowing light and hope and meaning. Elena could feel it pressing against her mind, whispering that there was no point, that she would fail, that she should just let go. She put the crown on her head. Elena, the Volanther said. Its voice was shaking. I want you to know that it has been an honor. In 11,000 years of existence, I have never been more proud than I am in this moment. Take care of them, Elena said. If this works, take care of them. They are going to need help. I will. Elena closed her eyes. She thought of her daughter's laugh. She thought of her husband's hands. She thought of sunrise over the mountains of Earth, a planet she had not seen in 50 years. She thought of the first time she had held a rock and wondered what secrets it held. She thought of every small, beautiful moment that had made her life worth living. She gathered all of it. Every memory and feeling and dream. And she pushed it into the last voice. The crown blazed with light. The Volanther screamed through space. Trailing fire that was not fire. Light that was not light. It plunged into the heart of the hollow like a lance into a wound. And the darkness, for the first time in its endless existence, felt something it had never felt before. Pain. The hollow shrieked. It was a sound that was not a sound, a sensation that rippled through every mind within 1,000 light years. People on distant worlds fell to their knees. Ships lost power. Stars flickered. And in the center of the chaos, a tired old woman who had lost everything gave everything she had left to buy her species one more chance. The light faded. The Volanther was gone. Elena Vasquez was gone. But the Hollow was retreating, dotted, pulled back from human space, wounded and confused. For the first time in its existence, something had hurt it. Something had made it afraid. It did not understand what had happened. It did not understand how one small, fragile creature had struck it so deeply that it would not return for 50 years. When it did, humanity was ready. They had used the time Elena bought them. They had studied the Hollow's weaknesses. They had built new weapons based on the last voice, weapons that did not require the ultimate sacrifice. They had learned from the Sithrain's mistakes and from Elena's example that the war lasted a century. It was brutal and costly, and there were times when humanity almost fell. But every time they were pushed to the edge, they remembered the old woman who had given everything. They remembered her face on their screens, her voice saying words that had become humanity's battle cry. We don't know how to give up. In the end, the Hollow was driven back. It retreated to the dark spaces between galaxies, weakened and afraid. For the first time in its existence, it had lost. A monument was built at the coordinates where the Volanther had made its final flight. It was a simple thing, a pillar of white stone floating in the void. The plaque on its surface was written in 100 human languages and one alien script that only the oldest archives could still translate. It read. She held the line, but every human child learned the longer story. They learned about the geologist who found an alien ship. They learned about the Sithrani who had waited 11,000 years to give humanity a chance. They learned about the woman who had lost everything and decided that was exactly what qualified her to save everyone else. The story was passed down through generations. It became legend. It became myth. It became something more than history. And somewhere in that story, in the telling and retelling, a truth emerged that the Sithrani had understood, but never been able to express. Humans were not special because they were smart or strong or powerful. They were special because when everything was taken from them, when all hope was lost, when any reasonable species would have laid down and died, they looked at the darkness and said no. They said no, and they got back up. And they kept fighting until they won. That was the gift Elena Vasquez gave her species. Not the technology or the weapons or the knowledge. Those things faded over time, replaced by newer inventions. What remained was the reminder of who they were. What remained was hope. Far away, on the edge of human space, an ancient ship drifted through the stars. The Volanther had survived the final battle, damaged but alive. It had kept its promise to Elena. It had watched over humanity for centuries, quietly guiding them, protecting them, honoring the woman who had given it purpose again. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between stars, the ship would replay its memories of Elena, her laugh, her stubbornness, her refusal to give up even when she had nothing left. The Volanther had waited 11,000 years for a human. It had been worth the wait.